My husband told me his friends didn't think I was impressive enough. I whispered, "Go find better." Then I did something he never saw coming. I put my wedding ring down on a hospital tray at 4:47 in the morning, and the sound it made, that small, flat tick of metal on plastics, was the quietest thing I had ever done and the loudest sound in the room. Evan stared at it, then at me. For the first time in 6 years of marriage, he looked at me the way you look at something when you understand, too late, that it was real. Not decoration, not furniture, not the comfortable, reliable backdrop of a life built around someone else's comfort. Real. "Lauren, please." "You were right," I said. His face broke open. "What?" I held his gaze for one last moment. He was smaller in that hospital bed than I had ever seen him. Stitches above his left ear, wrist wrapped, the specific deflated quality of a man whose arrogance has been physically redistributed. The fluorescent lights made everything look like evidence. "Go find something better." I walked out. Behind me, I heard him say my name once more. The way you say something when you know it's already too late. I didn't turn around. "Let me tell you about the 6 years before that hospital room. Let me tell you about the beer and the phone and the casual, offhand sentence that ended everything. Let me tell you what I did in the 36 hours between that sentence and the ring on the tray." Quietly, methodically, without a single dramatic scene. Let me tell you what it looks like when a woman who has been told she's not impressive enough decides at last to agree. I had been married to Evan Calloway for 6 years when he said it. 6 years is long enough to know someone's coffee order and sleep position and the 3 topics you never raise after 9 p.m. Long enough to have built something that looks, from the outside, like a life. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in the part of the city that's not quite trendy but aspires to be. A joint savings account with $47,000 in it. A standing Sunday reservation at the restaurant on the waterfront that Evan liked because it made him feel like a certain kind of person. I was 31. I worked as a contracts manager at a mid-sized tech firm, the unglamorous machinery of business, the person who reads what other people sign and makes sure it means what they think it means. I was good at it. I had been promoted twice in 3 years, managed a team of 4, and had a reputation for the kind of careful, structured thinking that produces very few crises and very little visibility, which suited me. I had always been comfortable being the person who handles the thing, so it doesn't become a problem. I should have recognized, in retrospect, that I had accidentally applied this approach to my marriage. Evan was in sales, enterprise software, the kind where the deals are large and the personalities required to close them are larger. He was charming in the specific, calibrated way of someone who has spent years learning how to read a room and give it what it wants. 6'1", keeps himself in shape with the dedicated vanity of a man who considers this a professional asset. His friends were a specific type, loud in restaurants, competitive about things that don't require competition, the kind of men who say we should do this more often at the end of every dinner and mean it about 30% of the time. The red flags were there. I want to be honest about that because the version of this story where I was blindsided is less true than the version where I was choosing for years not to see. The comments started small, a suggestion that I could dress differently for his company events, not a criticism, just an observation. A remark about a friend's wife, how she'd really blossomed since changing careers, delivered while looking at me with a specific quality of neutrality that conveyed the opposite. The way he described me to new people. Lauren manages contracts, with a slight pause before manages that I couldn't have proven meant anything and that I never forgot. I told myself, he's in sales. He sells. Comparison is his native language. It doesn't mean anything. I told myself that for 6 years. It was a Tuesday in October. I know it was a Tuesday because I had worked late finishing a contract review and had come home to find Evan on the couch in the precise configuration he occupied for most evenings. Feet on the coffee table, beer in one hand, phone in the other, the television providing ambient noise while the phone provided actual stimulation. I was in the kitchen making tea, a domestic detail that I include because it matters. The ordinariness of it, the steam from the kettle, the sound of the spoon on the mug, the particular quality of a weeknight that has no particular reason to become a before and after moment. "My friends think you could be more impressive," Evan said. He said it the way you say traffic was bad or it might rain tomorrow. Not looking up from his phone, not pausing between sips. The casual confidence of someone delivering a message they don't expect to be problematic. The air in my chest went cold. I stood in the kitchen doorway with my mug in both hands and looked at him, and I noticed, with a particular clarity, that he still had not looked up. "My friends say you could be more impressive," he continued, apparently interpreting my silence as a request for elaboration. "That I could do better. That you're just, I don't know, not where they expected me to land." My voice came out quiet, almost polite. "Then go find something better." He laughed, the small, ugly laugh of someone who has miscalibrated the room and doesn't know it yet. "Come on, Lauren, it's just a joke." "Right," I said. I turned back to the kitchen, finished my tea, washed the mug, dried my hands on the dish towel. Inside, very quietly, very privately, I crossed a line I would never cross back. I did not tell him that night. I did not tell him the next morning, or the morning after, or any of the 17 days between that Tuesday and the hospital room. What I did instead was begin. It started that same night, after he'd gone to sleep. I lay in the dark on my side of the bed, looking at the ceiling, and I made a list in my phone's notes app under a title I called Administrative. The things that would need to happen, in what order, executed with the same careful methodology I applied to contracts at work. No dramatics, no confrontations, just the orderly dismantling of a structure that had been built on my willingness to accept being told I was insufficient. The Portland anniversary trip was first. I had planned it. Evan, to his credit or discredit, had said you handle it, which he said about most things that required sustained organizational effort. I had booked the hotel, the restaurant, the train tickets, $240 in non-refundable deposits, $360 in refundable ones. I canceled the refundable portions that night and applied for the refund on the hotel's cancellation policy. I said nothing to Evan. The watch came next. I had spent 3 weeks choosing it for his promotion, a piece from a brand I couldn't really afford but had bought anyway, because that was who I had been in this marriage. Someone who spent beyond comfort on gestures for a person who responded to those gestures with the mild appreciation of someone receiving their due. I packaged it back up, returned it, received $840 back to my personal card, said nothing. The waterfront reservation, Saturday, 7:30, the table by the window that Evan preferred. Canceled. No penalty. 48 hours notice. Still nothing. I was removing bricks, quietly, methodically, from a house we'd built together. And Evan did not notice because Evan had never been the one who built it. He had assumed the house would always be there. He had not paid attention to who was maintaining it. I started updating my resume. I had not touched it in 3 years. Looking at it was like reading a document written by someone who had not yet learned to manage down her own expectations. Someone who had planned to go further, do more, lead something. I spent 4 evenings on it after Evan was asleep, sitting in the kitchen with my laptop on the table and the quiet of a late night in an apartment where something has already ended, even if no one has said so. I started looking at apartments, not with the frenzy of crisis, with the careful, methodical attention of someone doing research. Small places, 1 bedroom, the neighborhoods Evan had always dismissed as not quite right for where he saw himself going. Big windows, good light, places that felt, in the photographs, like somewhere a person could think clearly. I made spreadsheets, 2 columns, current cost, projected cost. The math was more manageable than I'd expected. 3 years of absorbing the majority of household organization had quietly also produced most of the household's financial management, which meant I knew exactly where everything was and exactly what it amounted to. The joint savings account held $47,000. My individual contribution over 6 years, accounting for the ratio of our respective incomes and expenses, came to approximately $31,400. I noted this. Evan, in those 17 days, was exactly himself. Went to the gym. Laughed too loud on work calls. The performing laugh of someone who wants to be heard through walls. Fell asleep scrolling his phone while I lay awake beside him, adding to my lists. One Friday, he grabbed his jacket at 8:30. Night out with the boys. Don't wait up. He said it with the ease of a man who has never had to wonder if the person he's leaving will be fine without him. Because she is always fine. Because she has built her reliability into the foundation of everything, and it has become invisible the way foundations do. Okay, I said. He paused. Looked at me with a slight frown that I recognized as the expression of someone noticing something slightly off but unable to locate what it is. My calm, not the dull calm of habit, but something cleaner, more settled, seemed to register as a change in atmospheric pressure. He looked at me 1 extra second, then he left. That night, for the first time in months, I fell asleep before midnight and slept straight through until 4 a.m. When my phone woke me, it was not an alarm. Unknown number, then again, then a third time, in the specific pattern of someone who needs to be answered. Hello? Heavy breathing. Then a voice I recognized despite the quality of someone who has been crying and is trying not to. Nick, Evan's closest friend, the one at the center of the group, the one Evan most wanted to impress, the one I had sat across from at dinners for 6 years and had understood, each time, to be the audience Evan was performing for when he performed for me. But this was not the Nick I knew. That Nick was polished, confident, faintly condescending in the way of someone who has never been required to doubt himself. This voice was unraveled. Lauren. A pause. Something happened tonight. My chest tightened. Where is Evan? Long silence. The kind that contains information. This has to do with you. Drinking, the usual, the kind of night that has a shape Evan had been running for years. Evan got loud. Nick said this with the particular precision of someone choosing a word carefully. Loud, not drunk, not sloppy, loud, like the distinction mattered. Then Evan pulled out his phone. My messages. Our messages. Photographs. Private ones. Intimate ones, the kind that exist in a marriage because you trust the person you're married to with the specific vulnerability of being completely known. He showed them to his friends. Lauren, Nick said, and his voice cracked on my name. They were laughing. My hand had closed around the phone so tightly I could feel my own pulse in my palm. He kept going, Nick said. He was performing. He said you'd never leave, that you loved him more than he loved you, that you should be grateful he stayed. The words landed one at a time, each one finding something specific to damage. You'd never leave. You loved him more. You should be grateful. The cruelest part of being told something like that is when it's built from pieces of truth. Evan had known for years that I accommodated and maintained and adjusted. He had filed this information about me under reliable and used it as evidence that I would never act. He had performed my predictability for his friends. He had been wrong for 17 days and didn't know it yet. I told him to stop. Nick said. He laughed, said I was being too sensitive. A pause. So I hit him. Catherine's medical center was too white and too bright and too cold in the way emergency rooms are always too cold. Like the temperature is calibrated to keep everyone slightly uncomfortable, so they're reminded where they are. Nick was near the vending machines when I arrived. Blood on his shirt cuff, a bruise spreading along his jaw that he would be explaining to people for 2 weeks. His eyes were red in the way that comes from crying that you don't want to have done, that surprises you while it's happening. He looked at me when I walked in, and I could see him assembling an apology. Did you laugh? I said, before you hit him. Did you laugh? His face crumpled. That was enough. I didn't say anything else to him. Not then. Evan was in Bay 4 behind a curtain that didn't fully reach the floor. Concussion. Moderate, the kind that requires observation. 6 stitches above his left ear from where his head had connected with the edge of a kitchen counter on the way down. Possible fractured wrist. Still waiting on imaging. He was alive. I want to be clear that this mattered to me, that I was not in that hospital room hoping for something different. He was alive, and I was relieved he was alive, and those two things existed simultaneously with everything else. He saw me and flinched, not relief, not the involuntary move towards someone you love when they arrive somewhere hard. Fear. I stepped toward the bed. Did you show them my messages? He closed his eyes. I was drunk. There it was. The most reliable phrase in the English language for transferring the location of an action from the person who chose it to a chemical substance that can't be held accountable. I was drunk, as though being drunk makes decisions rather than removing the inhibition to make them. Were you drunk when you told me your friends didn't think I was impressive enough? I said. He opened his eyes. Were you drunk for the last 6 years, Evan? Or was that just who you are when nobody can see you? He started to cry, and I watched him do it, and I understood, in the way you understand things in rooms that are too bright and too cold at 4:40 in the morning, the difference between regret and loss. Regret is what you feel when you've done something wrong. Loss is what you feel when you realize what the consequence is. They look the same from outside. They are not the same thing. Evan was not crying because he had shown strangers my private life for their entertainment. He was crying because he thought I might actually leave. I reached into my coat pocket. The ring had been there since I'd taken it off in the car on the way to the hospital, in the dark of the parking garage. Holding it in my hand for a moment and feeling its weight with the particular attention of someone cataloging a thing before they return it, I set it on the tray beside his bed. Metal on plastic. Quiet. Final. He stared at it, then at me. The full look. No performance. No calibration. The look of someone who has just understood something at the last possible moment. Lauren, please. You were right, I said. His face came apart. What? I held his eyes for one last moment. Let him find in them whatever he could find. Go find something better. I walked out of Bay 4, past the 2 bright lights and the 2 cold air, past Nick near the vending machines who said my name once and whom I passed without stopping, through the sliding glass doors, into the parking garage, into my car. I sat there for exactly 4 minutes. I know because I was watching the dashboard clock, the way you watch something when you need something concrete to look at. Then I drove home. By sunrise, I was at the kitchen table with my laptop and everything I needed. I want to tell you about these hours because they matter, because the story does not end with the ring on the tray, and the hours that follow a dramatic moment are where the actual consequences of that moment are built. 7:02 a.m. online banking. I had spoken with my attorney, David Park, 9 years in family law, the specific efficiency of someone who had answered an emergency call at 5 a.m. without complaint, while still in the hospital parking garage. He had advised me on what I was and was not legally able to do unilaterally before filing, and I had done the math, and I moved forward within those lines. The joint savings account, $47,000. My documented contribution over 6 years of marriage, calculated against salary differential and household expense records I had maintained. I manage contracts. I maintain records, came to $31,400. I transferred $31,400 to my individual account, which I had opened 14 days earlier, on the 3rd day of my quiet dismantling, at a different bank than ours. I left $15,600 in the joint account, more than Evan's proportional share, because I am not interested in taking more than is mine. I never have been. 7:34 a.m. Passwords. Email, which had been shared. A habit from early in the marriage that I had let continue past the point of sense. Social media. Not because I thought he'd do anything with my accounts, but because I no longer wanted him to have them. The streaming services, the subscriptions, the small digital infrastructure of a shared life changed, all of it. 7:51 a.m. I emailed the Human Resources Department at my company with a request to update my emergency contact and beneficiary designations on my benefits package, effective immediately. 8:00 a.m. I called my therapist, Dr. Sandra Cole, 13 years in practice, the particular warmth of someone who has been with you through enough that she knows the difference between a crisis and a decision. I left a message asking for an appointment this week, flagging that something significant had shifted and I wanted to talk through what came next. 8:09 a.m. I poured coffee. Sat at my kitchen table, in an apartment I had managed and maintained and organized for 6 years. And I looked out the window at the morning and felt something settle in my chest that I did not immediately have a word for. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. More like the particular feeling of ground under your feet after a long time in motion. 8:13 a.m. My phone lit up. A text from Evan's number. Please don't do anything until I get home. I sat with it for a moment. Then I typed 3 words. I already did. I need to tell you what the next 30 days looked looked like, because this is the part people skip over, and it was in some ways the hardest part, and also, eventually, the most clarifying. David Park filed the initial divorce paperwork on a Monday. He is the kind of lawyer who explains things completely, in plain language, without making you feel stupid for not already knowing them, which I appreciate. He walked me through what we had: a marriage of 6 years, no children, joint assets of documented value, and this was the piece I had been building toward, a significant evidentiary record. The messages, I had them all. 6 years of text history, saved and backed up and exported to a PDF the morning of that first appointment. Because I manage contracts and I know that documentation is what makes a claim into a fact. The phone call to Nick, I had asked his permission to record it before he began, and he had said yes, without hesitation, because Nick was by that point in the process of understanding exactly what he had been a part of and was not inclined to minimize it. That call was 37 minutes of Evan's closest friend describing, in specific detail, what had happened in that apartment. My attorney called this corroborated testimony. He said it calmly and wrote something down and told me it was useful. I also, on the advice of David Park, and after a conversation with Dr. Cole about whether this was in my interest, made a single call to Evan's employer. Not to report him, David had been clear about what that would and would not accomplish, but to speak with the HR director there, a woman named Ms. Patricia Osei, who had 14 years in employment and compliance, about whether the company had a policy on employees using private communications of a personal nature in professional or social settings. It was a hypothetical framing. Ms. Osei was professional and careful, and gave me information that was useful without saying anything she hadn't cleared to say. I noted what she told me. The divorce was not contested, ultimately. It was not uncontested in the sense of being easy. Evan had a counter-proposal, drafted by his attorney, a man named Gerald Ross, who had the beleaguered quality of someone managing a client whose strategy he does not agree with. But it was relatively uncomplicated. The $31,400 transfer was examined, documented by my records, and upheld. The remaining joint assets were divided along lines I considered fair, and David considered favorable to me, which is a pleasant alignment. What Evan wanted across the 3 months of proceedings was a conversation. He wanted, his attorney conveyed this several times in the careful formal language of legal communication, for me to acknowledge that he understood what he'd done, that he had sought counseling, which he had. His therapist, Dr. James Webb, filed documentation, that he was different now. I believed him. I believed that he was different now in the way that a person becomes different when the thing they counted on is gone. The becoming different was real. I just understood finally that it was not for me. It was not the consequence of caring about what he'd done to me. It was the consequence of losing something he had taken for granted. That distinction, Dr. Cole said, in one of our sessions in those months, which I attended every Tuesday at 4 p.m., is the whole thing. Grief over loss and accountability for harm can look identical from outside, she said, but they feel different when you're the one being grieved over. I knew how it felt. I had experienced both, and I knew the difference. There are things I want to tell you about, because they happened, and because honesty is the only way this story means anything. Nick called me in November, 2 months after the hospital room, the week after the divorce was finalized. I answered. He said, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to say, I should have said something years ago, and I didn't because it was easier not to, and that makes me as much a part of it as he was. I was quiet for a moment. Did you think I wasn't impressive enough? I asked. A long pause. No, he said. I thought he wasn't impressive enough for you. I just didn't say it. I thought about that. Thank you for calling, I said. I haven't spoken to him since. I don't know if I will. That's a door I haven't decided whether to open, and Dr. Cole has taught me that not all doors need to be opened immediately to prove you've processed something. I moved into my apartment in December. 1 bedroom, big windows, a neighborhood that gets good morning light on the eastern-facing wall of the kitchen, which I had not known when I chose it from photographs, and which turned out to be the thing I love most about it. I kept nothing from the apartment Evan and I had shared, except my own things: clothes, books, the coffee maker I had bought before we met and had brought into the marriage as mine. I did not take the Sunday reservation at the waterfront restaurant. I did not take the Portland trip that I had originally canceled and that had never been rebooked. I did not take the version of my life that had been organized around someone else's comfort and approval. I took myself. It's been 7 months. I want to tell you that every day is clarifying and purposeful, and that the light through the kitchen window is sufficient payment for everything that preceded it. Some days it is. Some days I sit at my kitchen table and feel the specific weight of 6 years spent being told, in small and not so small ways, that I was not quite enough, and I feel the particular grief of having believed it for as long as I did. Dr. Cole calls this mourning the self you accommodated away. It is not a fast process, but it is mine. The contract's work is good. I was promoted again in March, a structural reorganization that put me in charge of a team of 8, a role that required the kind of person who reads carefully and acts methodically and does not flinch from the thing that needs to be said. I have been told by people who matter to me that I am impressive. I find now that this matters less than I expected it to. What matters more is what I know about myself, in the kitchen with the good light, in the apartment I chose for my own reasons, that when the moment came, I did not scream or beg or negotiate my worth upward. I just agreed with him, and then I showed him what agreement looked like. He said I could be more impressive. He was talking about the wrong person the whole time.